we've been talking about for probably a year now, and so we're finally doing it, and we're really glad that you guys joined us tonight. We're going to be videoing this evening as well, as far as the speakers up here, so that way, if you guys want, you're welcome to share that with people that you may know who may not have been able to attend and may be interested in hearing some, the information and encouragement. So again, just welcome. We're glad you guys are here. I want to just kind of show you a couple things here tonight. Oh, and this isn't plugged in. That could be why. Okay. All right, so. Okay, so we have, basically we have two storytellers tonight. We're so fortunate to have them with us. They've been willing to share their testimonies. And after that, I'll be speaking, and then Pastor will be speaking, and then we will have a Q&A. Just so you guys know, Sarah Zai, where's Sarah Zai? She stepped out. I think she's out there. She has a basket that has index cards in it, so if in case you have any anonymous questions for the Q&A, feel free to put those in there, and we'll make sure to cover them. Try to get to all of them at the end. So again, thank you guys for being here. I want to invite up Jamie Cowhick first.
Hi, everybody. I'm really nervous, so if I go all over the place, I'm sorry. My name is Jamie. I was born on December 2nd to two drug addicts. My mom was 15 and my father was 17. I was actually placed in foster care as soon as I was born. I was taken straight to the hospital, or from the hospital, and then I was later adopted when I was about 2 years old. And all growing up, I had like this unknowing of where I come from. Like I always wanted to know where I came from, always. And like I had friends that would be growing up, or like when I was growing up, would be teasing me from being adopted because they didn't know anybody else that was adopted. So, and they would always ask me like, who are your real parents? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, why don't you know? So, and in the midst of all that, I was also sexually abused from 7 to 11. And the hole kept on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's when I had a friend that committed suicide. So that was like also around the first time I had ever been in contact with it. And I always felt like an outsider with my adopted family. And even to this day, I'm still not that close to them. My first suicide attempt that I had was when I was 13 years old. And I tried to run away as well. And my parents ended up taking me to a therapist, and the therapist ended up putting me on ADHD medication because they're so quick to do that and not really understanding how much trauma there was inside this. And whenever I ended up going as my school counselor in high school, she was like, no, you have PTSD. Like, you have PTSD. There's all there is to it. So all throughout school, I really didn't care. I just did what I had to do to get by. I had the same friends, and my out was gymnastics and dance, and for all throughout school, and that was my therapy that I had. And if I wasn't in that, then I didn't know who else I was. And when I was a junior in high school, I got injured and I was not able to dance again. So that broke a lot of dreams that I had. I had a lot of dreams about going to Juilliard and being a professional dancer and all this stuff. But in 8th grade, I had another suicide attempt, and that's when I started using drugs. The normal pot and drinking alcohol when you're first getting started. And then at 9th grade, I also had another suicide attempt. And anywhere from like 10th to 12th, I also had suicide thoughts pretty much weekly. I wanted to get away from, I was born in Illinois. I wanted to get away from Illinois so bad. I wanted away from all the chaos. I wanted to find basically, not necessarily my birth family, but like my own family, and that's where I've gotten here actually, is friends that have became family. And I had absolutely no relationship with God. Like I knew he was there, but I had so many resentment toward him. Like I really hated him. And anything that would happen to me, I would just curse him out and be like, God, really? Like, seriously? Like, again? And that put me on a run for even more trauma. I ended up meeting my birth mother when I was 19, and I dealt with it in a really different way. I got very, very depressed, and I longed for that for so long, but I got so depressed after I met her because she told me everything that happened and everything that led to, me being in foster care and stuff like that. So I ended up dying. I'm a natural blonde, and I dyed my hair black, and I looked like death. Like, that's all I wanted. I wanted to die, and I didn't care how I was going to do it. And that's when I started ODing on drugs, and I didn't care. And I ended up getting into a relationship with a guy who was physically abusive. And in that, was totally wasted one day, and we got into a fight, and he held me at knife point. He threw me down a flight of stairs. And from that, my depression was even more. I started isolating more. The attempts and the thoughts got stronger. And then I ended up going to Kentucky because I really wanted to go to University of Kentucky because I was always a big fan of theirs. So I ended up going, and that's when I met my ex-husband. And all throughout the time that we were there, we were partying the whole entire time. And I found just another addict just like I was. And we ended up moving here together, actually. And then when I was a senior, too, we had a teacher at my high school that committed suicide. And I went to a Lutheran school. And when there was like all kinds of counselors that came to the school and wanted to see if we were okay. And the vice principal was actually his best friend, and the wife had called him to help the cops cut him down. So that affected us in a different way. And that was also around the same time that Kurt Cobain died. And I was a huge fan of Nirvana. And we dressed in black, basically for Kurt Cobain and not for the teacher, but we were all in mourning for both. We really were. But anyway, I lived in Kentucky for a while, and that's when I got diagnosed with endometriosis. And I have stage 4, which is the worst one. And that is also around that time is when I had my first miscarriage. And that is when I also got Baker-acted. And then they tried to put me on an antidepressant. But all throughout my life on antidepressants, I would think that I would need it. And then I thought I was doing okay. And then I thought I needed it. And I would go off and on by myself, not knowing that I really needed to be on it. When we were in Kentucky, we ended up dropping out of college, and we moved back to Illinois. And then a couple years later, we ended up moving here. And like a year later, I ended up getting divorced. He is Brazilian, and he was really loving the Miami South Beach lifestyle. And he cheated on me multiple times. And I found out from a friend. And when I got separated, I met a guy who I can't even tell you. It went on, off and on, for 8 years. He ended up sexually trafficking me, off and on, for the 8 years. And to get away from that was horrible. So in the middle of the 8 years, I ended up having 2 abortions, and they were both by him. And I also had a stillborn. And after the abortions, you always hear that you are a different person in the pro-life movement, it's really hard for the women and the families afterwards. And I'm telling you, you go into that clinic one person, you come out another. Like, for real. After I had the stillborn, I ended up I was at Hard Rock, and I lived in Coral Gables at the time. I ended up getting extremely drunk and high, and the only thing that was on my mind was to die. So I ended up driving a 95 back home, completely wasted, and I was going at like 120 because I did not care. And there's a 3 Days Grace song that's called Pain, and I had that song like on a repeat because I was in so much pain. And when I got home, I ended up grabbing a razor blade, and I cut my wrist pretty bad. And when that happened, there was blood all over the place, and I ended up getting Baker-acted that night. But in the meantime, I was calling God, like, please help me. Like, I know that I really have not been with you, and, I know that I don't even know if you're out there anymore, but please help me. And he led me to stop. And that's when I ended up calling 911, and City of Miami Police Department came, and then they Baker-acted me. And they wanted to keep me longer, but I was not ready at the time to become sober or anything. I still wanted to become numb. So after that 72 hours, I lied to the doctor so I could get out. And I worked at state attorney's office at the time, and the cops that Baker-acted me actually knew me. And they knew that if they didn't do just something, that was going to be it. And I can't even tell you the times that, outside of the suicide attempts, all the times that I've overdosed. And, there's still questions on whether some people think that that's intentional or not, and that could be an attempt. I believe some of them were and some of them weren't. But I ended up, after all that happened, I moved back to Illinois thinking that I could have some sort of peace, and things got worse. I ended up meeting a guy that was a Latin king, dated him, and saw all kinds of stuff. And I ended up getting raped twice, and drug addiction got worse, and I ended up moving back here in the middle of the night, and just left everything there, because I knew that if I stayed there, that was it. I was going to be in jail, or I was going to be dead, but not on my own will. So when I ended up moving back to Florida, I connected with the guy again that was trafficking me, and then it started all over again. So I ended up going, I used to drive. I was living in Plantation at the time, and I drove by Our Savior's Lutheran Church all the time when I was going to work, because I was homeless also at that time. And I was like, maybe I should call this pastor. Maybe, if I call this pastor, he'll talk to me. And I ended up, it took me like 2 weeks, but I ended up calling the pastor. And he referred me to Hope Women's Center, which is in Broward. And they have a post-abortion Bible study. So I ended up taking that Bible study. And normally they do not let women come in that are not saved and do not have a relationship with the Lord. But they made a special exception. And there's women that I still talk to that remember the exact way that I came in. And so they let me in. And that really, honestly, that Bible study pretty much saved my life. I started going to Celebrate Recovery afterwards, whenever I got done with the Bible study at Calvary Chapel, Fort Lauderdale. And that's when I got saved. I got saved on Christmas Eve of 2010. Yeah. And, the drugs, it was hard, when you have been using them for so long. I ended up getting 5 years clean. I ended up having a sobriety date of February 15th, 2011. And I ended up relapsing. And just having the head knowledge of recovery, and now you have the head full knowledge of the Bible, and that is the worst conviction. It's horrible. And during that time too, the thoughts were all the time. I didn't have any attempts, but I had the thought. The one in Coral Gables was my very last attempt that I had. I was cutting though. I was still cutting. But I got saved, and then my sobriety date. I had 5 years, and during that time that I had relapsed, I lost my best friend to an overdose. So that night, I remember waking up in the middle of the night, screaming, and just asking God why. And when I was doing the steps at Celebrate Recovery, I also learned that my birth mom had committed suicide. So, and it's 6 days apart between when my best friend passed away and then when my biological mom passed away, which is around Christmas. So I can't stand Christmas. Even to this day, I still despise Christmas. And I ended up going to treatment. And that is right around the time that I was finishing my bachelor's. I was going to school. I started going to school at Trinity, where a couple of the guys are here, for psychology. And I had a minor in Christian ministry. And I was talking to Nina all the time. I was always in her office bugging her. But after I relapsed is when I was getting ready to be done. And I knew that if I continued in the path that I was going, all of that was going to get taken away. Everything that I worked for. And I ended up getting addiction certifications, and I was working in treatment, and everything was gonna get taken away from me. So I ended up getting sober again. I got sober for about 18 months, and then I relapsed again. And then now I have June 2nd, 2017 is my sobriety date now. And God willing, that will be my sobriety date forever. I'm not going to lie, I'm in grad school right now, and I'm actually finishing in December, and I just got accepted into a PhD program. Yeah, for mental health, and I'm going to do a concentration in trauma, actually. So, and I'm not going to lie, it has been very, very hard, and I've during all this time, I have realized that I have to be on medication, because if I don't, I'm not gonna last. Like, I go completely self-destruction, like times 10, if I am not on my medication. And then, like, if I get out of it and then and I forget to do the refill or something, like, I have anxiety because I know how bad I need it. And I still have a lot of anxiety. I still have a lot of depression, but it's not nearly of what it was before. Not even close. Because I know who helps me now. Yeah. And when that happens, I do pray. I'm like, God, we talk like friends, So, and I've done one set of EMDR, and I'm doing the second set right now at Sheridan House. And this round that I've done has been the most effective I can't even tell you. I have gotten so much healing since I've been doing EMDR at Sheridan House, because with it being biblical focused, and then, the secular to it has helped me so much. And my therapist actually is also a graduate of Trinity. So we talk about TIU too. But, I have had a couple of ideations, but like, I know that I'm not going to do anything with them. And, I probably am going to, I don't want to say probably, I might have the thoughts for, a while until EMDR is over, or I don't know. Hopefully, God willing, I won't. Because God does save, and he has saved me. But now that I lost someone that close to me from suicide, my mom, I know completely what it's like to be the suicide survivor. And just the feeling that I had with that is enough not to ever have any attempt ever again. And just the pain and the therapy that I've gone through because of that. And a lot of pastoral counseling too. But yeah, so that's my story. I feel like I rambled.